Trump's former Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, who's joining us now from Virginia. Welcome back to the program. Can I start by asking you about Syria? And as you know, so many different factions and groups are operating on the ground there. One of them has emerged dominant and is the ruling one. But how do you see this playing out?
Well, first of all, good to be with you again, Kристиан, and enjoy talking with you. So look, we know that HTS, the lead group on the ground, led this incredible resurgence and assault that toppled the Assad regime in, less than a week or so. And of course, that's a great thing to celebrate for many years, the brutal reign that the Assad regime has put upon the Syrian people. But we don't know what's going to come next. And that's the big question. Its leader, Mohammed al-Jalani, has been saying the right things. He's been doing the right things and with regard to reaching out to other communities, whether it be Christians or Druze or Kurds, you name it. And he's been showing restraint with his troops. So I think that's the big unknown. I'm really glad to see that the EU interlocutors and the United States are engaging with him, trying to figure out what path he intends to take the country and how he intends to lead. And so far, we know he's put in place, leading the country, this former governor, if you will, from Idlib province. And so far, we should be reasonably happy with how things have been progressing relative to other Arab states that have been overturned, whether it was Iraq, notably in 2003, or Libya, where it's really gone bad and descended into factionalism and a civil war. We may still see that, but so far, I mean, there's hope.
Mm-hmm. So there are so many factions, including competing Kurdish factions, one backed by the US, the other backed by Turkey. And actually, President-elect Trump said this week that he thinks Turkey will have a big amount of leverage and a big say in what happens in Syria. And I think many people in the region think Turkey is the big player, big winner in what just happened. So what do you think? Because remembering back to the first Trump administration and you having to execute an order to pull back American forces there, what should the US do, even if it's, I mean, can it do complete hands-off? Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says no, because it has to make sure ISIS doesn't come back.
Yeah, no, the short answer is no. Look, I don't see any reason right now to have American boots on the ground. But we have interests there, a number of interests. You mentioned Turkey. Turkey clearly is the winner here right now. They supported these rebel forces. They armed and resourced them. And so now we see, as you mentioned, they're going after the PKK, which they consider a terrorist group. And we're trying at the same time to defend the Syrian Democratic Forces, which have been allies of ours against ISIS. But the bigger picture is this. When you talk about American interests, we have an interest in Russia losing its foothold in the Middle East. And we should probably talk about that because they have those two strategic bases, a naval port at Tartus and a air base further up north in Latakia. And then second, and maybe more importantly, we see that Iran currently is out of Syria. And that Syria for decades has been the major conduit between Tehran and Lebanon to resupply, support, arm Hezbollah since it's the founding in the early 80s. So the two major strategic interests we have right there are get Russia out and keep Iran out. Thirdly, I guess, we want to make sure that whatever emerges in Syria does not become a terrorist state, much like Afghanistan. Fourth, we want to make sure that country that emerges isn't a threat to our ally, Israel. And then fifth, again, we have to make sure we support our Kurdish allies on the ground. So there are a number of U.S. interests here. We definitely need to be involved. I'm glad to see the administration, the current one, engaging, and I hope that the Trump team, when it comes in, will continue that engagement to shape the future of Syria for the better.
Mark Esper, let me ask you, because you brought it up. Obviously, as you said, the Russians for decades have had those bases there, and it's where they project their power into the Middle East, into Africa, and they've got quite a lot of foothold in that regard. How does the US get Russia out of there? I mean, I'm really interested to know how you think that could happen. And is there any kind of Ukraine link that you can think of?
Well, clearly, what has enabled Russia's departure which was preceded by Russia's inability to support Syria here over the final few weeks, was the fact that it's distracted in Ukraine, that it has expended a lot of military forces in Ukraine, and probably saw it unable or unwilling to support Syria at this point. And so, what we see now is them pulling quickly S-300, S-400 air defense systems out, flying them out of the country. We see the naval forces assets moving offshore. But when it comes to pushing them out and keeping them out, this should not be difficult because HTS, the rebel group on the ground, knows that for 50 plus years, as long as Russia has had bases there, they have been supporting the Assad regime. They have been enabling the killing of Syrians for decades. And of course, most notably in the last 10 years, since Assad moved to put down the latest insurgency, Russia was bombing Syrians. They were using other troops to engage Syrians. And so their history there is not good. So I imagine HTS would keep them out. We know that Moscow is trying to stay in. I think we need to get in on those negotiations as well. And I see already that, the EU, for example, is talking about there can be no sort of normalization, if you will, let alone humanitarian assistance or rebuilding assistance, if Russia is allowed to stay in country. So I think things like that, a combination of soft power with incentives and disincentives, are the way to engage HTS and bring them along so we could see, again, not just a better future for the Syrian people with more normalized governance, but a Syria that no longer has Russia occupying major ports and facilities.